The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to discuss 5 benefits of using an influencer ambassador strategy. So I'm grateful that you could spend the time to be with us today. Let's jump in and get right to it. First of all, this is a dynamic presentation, or at least we want it to be a dynamic presentation. So please submit your questions throughout. So we have somebody monitoring the questions. We'll definitely answer them at the end, but if there's something urgent relative to what we're talking about at the time, certainly do submit them. The best way is through that little chat window in the GoToMeeting presentation box. So please feel free to do that. We are recording today's session and we will send it out to you if that helps as you take notes. And if you'd like to tweet, please do. We're monitoring Twitter for @carousel and/or #influencerwebinar, and you can also get our attention that way. So let's get rolling. My name is Jim Tobin. I'm the guy on the left there. I'm the only guy on the slide, in fact. I started a company called Ignite Social Media in 2007, and then Carousel, which we're talking about today, in 2015. I've written a few books on social media, first one in 2008, the second one in 2013, and so I've been working on social media marketing for brands for a little over a decade at this point. Joining me today is Courtney Diudo. Hello, Courtney.
Hello.
She has worked on a lot of influencer marketing campaigns, so brands like Pepsi, Walgreens, Hallmark, and so she is every day making the magic happen, as it says in her bio. So she is communicating with influencers, helping with strategies, making sure everything goes off without a hitch. So she has a much different level of knowledge than I do, and hopefully today the combination of the two of us will be helpful to you as you plan your influencer strategy for 2018. So with that introduction, Courtney, I'm going to ask you to kick this off for us.
All right, guys. So we're going to start off with a few fun facts. As you can see, 69% of millennials have made a purchase based solely on an influencer recommendation. I'm not sure if you are a millennial. I'm sure you know one. I am actually in that category and can tell you based on experience, not just because I work with this industry, but maybe that has a little thing to do with it, but I've caught myself being influenced by influencers, and not even the ones all the time that I work with, but ones that I find on social or just come across naturally. For example, I've been using a dry shampoo that I saw from an influencer. I looked into it. I saw a post on Instagram. I went to her blog post. She wrote a whole blog post about all these different products. That's the piece that kind of resonated with me and what I was looking for at the time. And
your hair looks terrific.
Oh, thank you. So it must be working, but yeah. So I know this stat actually holds true for me. So I guess I fall into that 69%. But also, as you can see here, 61% of the women won't engage unless the content is authentic. And then engagement rates we've seen have increased 400% on sponsored influencer posts during carousel ambassador strategies.
And that's one of the questions I get a lot is when you have to disclose this content, #ad, #sponsored, whatever the case may be, how do you make sure it still feels genuine and consistent? And we're going to talk about that as we get into the content strategy later on in this deck.
Yeah, and as we're talking about ambassadors, so you can do one-off programs with your influencers, but really getting them to be involved with your brand and your messaging, even if that message changes slightly throughout the year, or even if you're doing like a longer span program, you'll see, we'll kind of go into this a little more, but you'll see that the messaging just becomes even more genuine and even more authentic because these people are really learning the brand, really learning what's going on with the company, and they can speak to it authentically to their followers. So we're going to go into content acquisition, audience insights, and now I sound like I'm on Jeopardy. Brand ambassadors, increased reach and engagement, and cost effectiveness. So let's start with content acquisition. So another fun fact, 57% of the US marketers state that influencer content outperforms professional content. And you'll see this. I mean, these people have built up their social channels and their followers follow them because of what they see on their channels. There have been studies showing that influencer content performs better than the brand content. The engagement levels perform better. Consumers are engaging with other consumers, and those are influencers. They are consuming these products, and so are their followers.
And that's, I think, I'm a little surprised the 57% number isn't higher personally. And I think partly it's because people don't have systems in place to really make sure they have the best content. So relative to that, I wanted to share one of the ways we try to work with that, and something you can adapt for your influencer programs is, in a given campaign, we'll do 100, 200, 300 pieces of content, and it's very hard to objectively look at that and rank it based on just eyeballing it and looking at the likes and such. So we built an algorithm we call the Content Performance Index, where we automatically stack rank each and every piece of content in a given campaign to know which is performing the best. And that's pretty important because what we're talking about here is also a license for the brand to reuse this content. And not every piece of content is going to be strong enough to override that effect of seeing the word ad or the word sponsor that we talked about on the last slide. But good content is content that inspires, content that's aspirational, content that you feel like you discovered a product through this post. It just performs better. And we see that over and over again, where about 15 to 20% of the content really performs better. So when we go back to that last slide of 57% of US marketers, we find a much higher percentage of the time, almost always, influencer content is outperforming the brand content, in part because we're picking from these top posts that really have proven to resonate better during the influencer campaign, and then when the brand shares them, they do better over and over again for those clients.
Yeah, so we wanted to share with you just some of the high quality content that we have. As you can see, there's a lot of different types of content here. We have video, we have stop motion, we have still frame images. We have pictures that show the content blatantly. We have images that don't. Some of these you might ask, well, what is the product that they're positioning? And that's exactly what we want when we're working with these influencers for ambassador programs and outside of those, to make sure that the messaging is as authentic as possible for a sponsored post. So for instance, this picture on the far top left, you're probably thinking, well, that's a great picture, but what is that? So that was actually for a Hallmark Father's Day post. He was a brand new father. That was this year, actually. And so this is one of the pieces of content that one of our influencers who, and you'll hear us talk about the Hallmark at Walgreens program being one of our ambassador programs. But so this is one of our ambassadors who posted a piece of content. And you can see the other pieces here. The videos are my favorite. I love stop motion, so anytime we can do anything with that, we definitely work with those types of influencers. But you can also see that there's different styles. We want the influencers to be genuine to their style. Of course, we weave in key messaging. We want to make sure that the brand is top of mind, but we also want to make sure that they are speaking the way that their audiences are used to them speaking, and showing images that are high quality and usable for the brand, but that are also familiar to what their followers are used to. And this is a good segue, I guess, into giving influencers their creative freedom. So again, we do want to make sure that key messaging and what the brand is looking to achieve in terms of their KPIs and other goals are hit, but we definitely want to make sure that influencers have the creative freedom that their audiences are used to.
Yeah, I think one of the earliest campaigns we did, which was really eye-opening for me on the success of these programs, was for ReadyWhip. And we were trying to actually drive sales of ReadyWhip at Walmart. And we had 250,000 coupon prints and downloads in 4 weeks, which was the limit that the brand set with coupons.com. And I was frankly a little bit surprised about that because, it's $1 off and the like. But, going back to this image in the upper left with the new father, likely whether it's in a blog post or it's in an Instagram album or a Snapchat story, there was other imagery in that post talking about the cards and things. And so with the ReadyWhip example, there were all sorts of recipes on planning a first birthday party and how ReadyWhip fit in with that. And I think if you're adding value and inserting the product, then it does really well to have that sort of mix of imagery.
Absolutely. Yep. And we wouldn't have them obviously do only sponsored, product shots and only shots that don't have the product in it at all. But and just kind of to add to that, so these are just images, but what you're not seeing here is that these are spread across their different social channels. So if someone is more dominant on Instagram, they're going to pick their best picture, put it on Instagram, versus somebody who's better on Facebook. So these are all images that can be spread out on all the different channels depending on, what works best for that influencer.
And we can get rid of that motion now and calm the screen down for a second. This article was in Adweek just, I think, a month ago at this point. And the main point of it, the headline, is sort of interesting. You're wasting money on influencer marketing. But if you look at the subhead there, it says influencer content is extremely underutilized. And I totally agree with that. We have very few clients that are really set up because of, I do digital marketing, I do social, I do influencer. There's so many silos across divisions within a company that often the influencer content isn't getting to the right people to be used, and a library isn't being built to be used. I mean, Christmas comes every year, Halloween comes every year, those sorts of things where there's a lot of evergreen influencer content over time, particularly with an ambassador strategy, that you can do really well. So we're doing a program right now with a large retail brand, and we're doing exactly this. We're creating all this content, and then we're sharing it in a variety of different ways, from their channels, from influencer channels, all these different ways, and measuring the performance based on really high business KPIs. So having that content and being prepared to use that content is an important thing as you go into an ambassador strategy. That's why it's also important to make sure you have a license to reuse this content built into all of your programs. We have it for all of ours, and it's in perpetuity for any use possible. And so Revlon's used it on a Times Square billboard, and Walgreens used it in the People's Choice Awards, and EAS used it as the home page at the front of their website. This is all content we created as part of Influencer, and that really dramatically increases the value of that content in terms of it living on, whether it's whether it's on in a point of sale materials, or it's in a website or an email, whatever the case may be. The other thing I want to mention here is at the lower right, there's this group Pinterest board here, and this is for a coffee brand that's a client of ours called Hills Brothers Coffee, and a group Pinterest board is a great way for a company to grow their own Pinterest presence. If they join this collaborative Pinterest board with the influencers, that content is now on their sort of Pinterest account, if you will, at the same time. So it's another good way to keep reusing this content. The second category or benefits of using an ambassador program is audience insights. And these fall into two sort of large categories of audience insights, I think. The first is the data-driven audience insights, and the second is the community-based audience insights. And so I'll touch on the data, and then Courtney will talk about the community. Audience insights, I find it interesting that a lot of influencer marketing hasn't really adapted to the sophistication of the rest of digital marketing. And so that's something we work on a lot to try and get all the benefits of digital marketing through influencer. And so one of the things we do that I think is interesting and helpful, because you may know that you got so many link clicks from influencer, or you had so many engagements or impressions, whatever KPI you're counting. What we're doing here on this particular slide is every time a link is clicked, so you click out of a blog post, you click to a blog post, wherever you're clicking a link that we've placed, if you click, we're automatically building a custom audience in Facebook of the clickers, so basically the engaged people. And that gives us a couple of advantages in using these sorts of things. Number one is, are we reaching the right kind of people that our client asked us to? So in this example from an actual client, 100% female, age 18 to 44. I hope that's what they asked you to get, Courtney, and because it seems like we hit it pretty solidly. But we can also tell them they're married, their household income is pretty high, their home ownership is very high. They're in this group called Summit Estates, which sounds like it does say people enjoying the good life. So we're not only reaching women 18 to 44. In this case, we're reaching a particular kind of woman 18 to 44 in terms of income and some other behaviors there. But not only that, that's good to know. It's an important insight to have. But then going back and saying, hey, this content we shared really resonated with this type of person is something you can tell your marketing team as you do your other marketing as to who really cared about your stuff when the influencers are saying it. And the other advantage we can then do is build a lookalike audience of these folks and then go get this content in front of people who are like the people who have expressed an interest by clicking.
Yes, so with a brand ambassador program, these influencers, and I know I touched on this a little bit earlier, but these influencers are constantly working with the brand, with the products, even if the products are changing or even if some of the key messaging changes, they know the brand. So as you can see here, we have just a sampling of some community insights of people who have responded to our influencers, have responded to parts of our programs to talk about the brand, to talk about their insight, to ask questions. So they're going to our influencers because they see them now as experts. So not only are they running the campaign once, but they've seen, because they're their followers or they've just joined them as followers, so they're seeing the trend of these different campaigns that they're running with the same type of program but the same brand. So again, they're seeing them kind of as experts. They are going to their pages not just to look up how they use them, but also to see, to ask them questions. And I'll let you I don't know if you can see what's on here, but people, whether it's, I just want to tell you about something that I have going on in my life, and our influencers are really responsive and able to talk about it with the brand in mind. And then if they have questions, I wasn't able to find this product, what can I do? And they come to us, or, the influencers know, hey, did you try Walgreens? Did you try online, or, whatever it is? And they kind of direct them into the right spot.
And I think people know that, JJ is run by Kevin, right? Mm-hmm. And Savvy Saving Couple, is that Amy?
Yep, Amy.
Oh, look, I got two right.
Yeah.
Are you impressed? They know that these are real people, and they're much more likely to get a response than from a giant corporation.
Right, and just like I touched on earlier too, the consumer to consumer, these are people who are telling their thoughts, their lifestyle, their different kinds of bloggers. They're not the brand. They're representing them in these different programs, but they're weaving in their real life experiences, making organic posts and talking to their influencers as a consumer. So their messaging is just a lot more powerful, or can be a lot more powerful than if the brand was trying to tell someone, hey, buy my product. Obviously, this is a type of word of mouth. It might be on social and not necessarily verbal, but it kind of goes into that play of word of mouth, consumer to consumer kind of conversations. So brand ambassadors, another fun fact here, because we love those. You can see that ongoing ambassadorships rise above the top of just product reviews, just brand mentions, event coverage, sponsored content. The more, just like we've been saying, the more people see these messages or this product or brand from these same people, it's really resonating with audiences, and you can see that stat here. So we have some examples, real life stories. You can see that these are real people, like we've been mentioning. They have their own stories. They have their unique perspectives. Their audiences find meaningful and inspirational thoughts from them. And again, they look for them for advice, and they trust them and what they say in their backgrounds.
Yeah, and I think this is important because, as a brand, you can talk about all sorts of things, and you can reach people. You can reach people who come to your website. You can reach people who signed up for email. You can reach Facebook fans sometimes. But through the targeting on Facebook and Insta and all these other platforms, you can reach very finely tuned target audiences that aren't even your fans. But as you do that, you're still talking to people about your brand directly from your brand. What these folks are talking about is categories of things. So the second post is date night, the third post is heart health, the fourth post is charity, those sorts of things. And then the brand is inserted into those. So it's a really valuable thing from these ambassadorships. And they get more credible, as we'll talk about on the next slide when people get involved over and over again.
Yeah, and you can see that it's not just the mommy blogger anymore. There is messaging coming from young professionals, coming from home decor, people who have families, people who are, young professionals and beauty and whatever. So, the brand, maybe it's a beauty brand. Well, they're probably just going to be speaking to a lot of beauty people, and they're maybe not able to reach some of the other groups that they're wanting to look at. So these people are able to do that because they come from such diverse backgrounds. And just as Jim was saying, you can see an example. So Mama in Heels here, this is Janice Bierfato. We've been working with her for years, since we launched in 2015. A little before then, we've been working with her on different programs. We've worked with her on an array of programs that you can see here. And she does a lot of different things. So you can see beauty, there's, snacks, food, all sorts of things that she works with. She has a family, so we work with her for different family events also, and her story just resonates with her audiences because of her, real life different experiences. So you can get influencer audiences involved, not just talking about it, but how do you get them involved in actually participating and showing the products or the things that you're trying to promote. So here are just a few examples of some things that we've done. You can see Pepsi here in the middle, that's actually for wet ones. And then on the right, that is EAS, sports powder. Yep. So anyway, what we had 3 different methods here of people who were submitting their own UGC for the products. When this is specifically during times when a call to action was sent out to them. So here's a challenge. We want to see your Pepsi emoji, or we want to talk about wet ones, and show us, when you would wish you had a wet ones, and then show us your best, EAS sports moment, or whatever the case may be. And people really, rise to the occasion. They want to show that they love the brand. They want to be involved. They want to show that they've heard the message. And when you do these things, I know what we've seen is that you get a lot of really creative pieces of content that come through, and you get to see all the different kinds of perspectives that are coming out of the people that you're trying to target, which is also really good insight for us when we're looking for other interests in to tell a brand or to work with.
Absolutely. It gives people a chance to say what they think as well, which is always a good way to go. A little bit on licensing here. We generally don't build our programs where we license this UGC automatically. You can do that. Not a huge fan of it. We have so much content being produced by the influencers that we do license that generally it's fine. If there's a piece of content that you want to use, probably the best way is to reach out and ask for permission to use that. Because, in this Pepsi example on the left, we had 1,300 submissions. We did not need rights to 1,300 of those. Actually, in this case, I don't think we need rights to any of those. But if there was one particularly good that we wanted to, then we can handle that one off. So the fourth sort of benefit of these ambassador programs is the increased reach and engagement that you get from them. So a couple points on this. Number one, when you ask PR and marketing professionals worldwide, what's the best use of influencer, the number one answer is raising awareness, which is really a reach metric here. And there's also an engagement sort of metric as well, in that we're able to measure how people do. But when I think about how campaigns do, when I think about this chart and the reach effectiveness, it's very difficult, actually. Well, it's somewhat difficult to measure the reach of an influencer program relative to the reach of other things you're doing. Part of that reason is that if you've got 20 influencers, you likely don't have true views because the platforms don't report them all back of how much the content was seen from the blog post, which we do have access to true views in most cases, but all the way through to Pinterest and everywhere else, you're not getting true views like you do when you buy ads. But once you can factor that in, you're able to do some calculations on the cost of reach and the cost of engagement that you get from influencer, particularly engagement, because you can't engage with something you didn't see, right? So you can measure the cost of engagement per dollar relative to other ways you're doing your marketing and the cost of engagement per dollar there, and it can become pretty competitive.
Yes, so I know we briefly discussed Hallmark being one of our ambassador programs that we've worked on. And as you can see here, there were a lot of different phases that we've worked on. So we've had Mother's Day to Grandparents' Day to holiday, excuse me. And as you can see on the bottom, it kind of goes hand in hand with what we discussed earlier of engagement rates increasing 400% on sponsored influencers posts during some of our ambassador strategies. And with these come an array of the storylines and an array of different perspectives that come through, whether we're working with mommies or we're working with people who just want to show bright colors, or couples who are celebrating Valentine's Day, or whatever the storyline may be. We have a ton of different angles here because we've been working with influencers constantly through different programs.
And that's one of the reasons we're not real big fans of the celebrity influencer, whether that's the Kim Kardashian of the world or the social celebrities, the huge followings of influencers. We use more of the sort of micro influencers, in part because they're much more willing to be actual brand ambassadors. I mean, we have people for this Hallmark campaign you mentioned yesterday, Courtney. They call you and say, when's the next time I can talk about Hallmark at this point? So they're really engaged with the brand. We have others who just give us way more content than they're contracted to do because they like it and they're interested in it, and it feels right to them. That's not what you're going to get with one of these alpha ambassadors. If you paid for 2 tweets, you're not getting 3. So it's really an efficiency play as well here. So speaking of which, the 5th benefit, I think, to what we're talking about here is cost effectiveness. And so there are a few ways to measure this. This is one that gets passed around a fair amount, is the average earned media value after implementing influence marketing per dollar. And so on the low end, you have shoes here at $3.70 per dollar. On the high end, you have CPG food at $11.3, tourism $7 per dollar. This is an okay metric, I think. What we also like to do, and I alluded this a little bit earlier, is measure, everybody knows what an impression costs. We buy on CPM all the time. Everybody knows or can find out what an engagement costs. You can buy on a CPE model for most of the platforms. People know what it costs to get a pay-per-click website visitor, because we have Google ads running and we're paying to get visitors. And so I think there's also the other way to do it that's a little more sophisticated than earned media value, is this sort of equivalency of what are these clicks worth? What are these website visits worth? What are these impressions worth? And because we buy those things all the time, and it can be difficult to know exactly how many sales you're getting from these types of programs. In certain situations we can do that, but it's when there's a product tied to retail, and that's not always the case with our clients. So the other way to think of this thing from a cost effectiveness program is, all right, I have $100,000. I can buy banner ads. I can do whatever, direct mail. I can do a local TV spot maybe, or I don't know. I can do a lot of things with that. And if I do influencer, how's that going to compare on an efficiency standpoint? I think that's a valid way of looking at things. So, but sometimes you can measure the actual sales impact. And so our friends at Tap Influence did this with Nielsen, Catalina, and White Wave Foods. And if you don't know White Wave Foods, they make silk almond milk, among other things. And what they were able to do is set up a nice test and control group for the 52 weeks prior to this campaign running, to make sure they had a very strong group of people with similar propensities to buy silk almond milk. Then they ran the campaign and they looked at the gap between this yellow line and this red line. Those were the incremental sales from the exposed group versus the unexposed group, the control group. And what it found was very, very compelling. In fact, it found a couple things. One, that the ROI continued to improve, because unlike banner ads, you buy 1 million impressions, you hit 1 million impressions, those banner ads come down and don't come back up until you until you pay more, they were able to see that while the campaign period may have been September and October for this, that the blog post got actual real views all the way through April, is where this study did obviously a bit beyond that. So they were getting increased views over time in this, and that drops the ROI down, or sorry, the ROI doubles, the cost per exposure drops as they get cumulative. And so what they ultimately found was that after 12 months, this was 11 times more effective than display, not only in exposure, but in purchase. So they found that for every 1,000 people exposed through this way, $285 of extra spending on silk almond milk occurred, which is 11 times better than what you can expect from a normal display ad. So in the few cases when you can measure this, and I can explain in more detail than you probably care about why there's only a few cases we can do this, it has been very, very promising. And again, if I'm interested in this topic enough to consume this blog post, I'm probably a pretty good candidate for purchase. So among the reasons is you can't pixel people in Facebook posts. So you can't separate a test and control group like this, like they did with these blog readers. So that's among the reasons. But it can be very, very efficient here. So with that, we've gone through the 5 benefits of an influencer ambassador strategy. We do have a couple of questions here. And what are you pointing at here? Okay. So hold on. Okay, so the first question is from, I think it's from Kate. Do you think influencer marketing can be used for B2B marketers? We have ingredients and we target food and nutrition. So B2B is candidly not something that we do here at Carousel much, but I would, as you do this, I would recommend, particularly for you, an ambassador strategy, because I think the B2B influencer marketing is more than a lot of these CPG products that we represent, is a more patient strategy, and you're likely going to want to find people with a particular level of expertise that is a little more challenging to find, and there's going to be fewer of them. So we have 2 databases that we use on our end. One's our custom built, roughly 7,500, and one is a licensed 50,000 influencer database that we use for more of the kind of syndication things. If you look for people who know about dairy ingredients in a way that your buyers are going to respect, it's probably a very small percentage of that. And so I feel like finding a few and turning them into ongoing ambassadors would be an interesting way to go. I don't think that our method, we're selling Revlon or we're selling a Hallmark card or we're selling other things pictured here. You need a very different level of expertise to be credible in the space. Do you have anything to add to that, Courtney? No?
No, I think that you summed it up.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
So I'll punt this one to you. Another question that has come in that we have is, what criteria makes an influencer ambassador worthy? So how do you know you've got a good influencer to sort of adopt?
So you want to work with, or you want ambassadors, I guess let me see if I'm answering the 2 things in my mind right now. So the types of people that you're wanting for ambassadors are, people who are going to speak truly, to what they know about the product or what they've learned or what they're wanting to learn. So speaking truly, but then also making sure to, shine the brand in the best light, while also keep it very natural to who they are. And then what kinds of brands, I guess, who should do ambassadors. I feel like if anything that a consumer could buy could be turned into an ambassador program, depending on how you're wanting to make that look on social. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
It wasn't my question.
Okay.
But the only other thing I would add to this is that we have another algorithm that we didn't show that ranks each influencer in a given campaign against one another, basically, for efficiency and reach and virality and those sorts of things. And so what we are constantly doing with our ambassador programs is evolving them. And so we may start with 10 and then continue with 6 of those and add a few more and continue with 5 of those 6 and keep 2 from the last one. That kind of thing is another way to go as well. So the next question, you said it's important to give the influencer creative freedom, but how do you ensure they properly talk about the brand or product? So I'll start with that one. We did a webinar, and it's on our website if you'd like to listen at any time, with influencers, asking them their favorite things with brands, the worst thing with brands. And under the worst things with brands, we got both, they won't let me do my thing, and they don't tell me what they want. So too many guardrails and not enough guardrails were both complaints. So the best influencers that we work with want to understand what you're trying to do with this campaign. What does success look like to you? Why is this product more interesting than their competitors? So what am I focusing on here? Convenience or price or quality or those sorts of things. And so what we do, we have a couple different ways, but the most important step in our process is what we call the welcome packet, which is actually our contract to the influencers, and it's worked on with us and the client to say, what should you be talking about? What's the goals of the campaign? What must you do, like FTC compliance? What must you not do, like don't make a health claim that this makeup cured my cancer or something outrageous like that. And so we're trying to give them the guardrails, and we want them to run right down the middle with their story angles, basically, that make sense for their lives.
Yeah, and I would add that keeping communication lines open. So what I do here at Carousel is I do a lot of things, but I am a liaison to our influencers and to our clients. So I'm the kind of go-between, making sure that the messaging coming from our clients is being produced by the influencers, while also making sure that their creative freedom is allowed, and working with the brands to kind of understand that, if you will, and just making sure that that fine line is walked so that all parties are satisfied. So just keeping the communication open. So, if an influencer has questions, well, I wanted to do it this way, walking them through why it is or is not a good idea, helping them to figure out other options if needed, or going back to the client and explaining, well, this is why we selected them. This is who your audience is. This is what we're, aligned on for this program, and just kind of making sure that everybody is aligned and that, again, the communication lines are open.
Yep, and I think our last question for the day is, well, there's kind of 2 that have come in, so we'll do both at once. Do ambassador programs prove more effective for certain verticals, and what does the timing look like for these programs? So I'll start with the verticals one, and I think the candid answer is yes. I think the salesman would want to say, which is kind of what I am, but when the ambassador works for everything, I don't know that that's true. I think influencers are particularly good magnifiers of social interest. And so, things people are interested in social include food and fashion and beauty and family and health and, all those sorts of things. They tend to do really well because we're then sort of amplifying interest that people have. I will say we did, one of the more challenging ones we ever did was for a surge, a backup power for home use if your power went out and you still wanted to use your voice over IP phone and your Wi-Fi connection. And it was this black box that you plug those things into, and then it did nothing. It did absolutely nothing until the power went out, and then still visually it did nothing. It just kept those 2 or 3 devices running for a few more hours. So it was really hard to create exciting content around this black box with a few plug holes in it. And how do you get people excited about it? And so we had to switch it around so that the strategy was really about, we had influencers go shut off all the power to their house and tell their families that the power had gone out, and then sort of document what they did with the 2 hours of their lives that they couldn't use the power. And then they turned it back on and let the family know. I suppose they told the family they weren't really without power. But and that was a good way to say, with this backup product, these things wouldn't happen, and still have content that people would resonate, would really want to read. Oh, if I wonder if I did that in my family, what would their reaction be if they couldn't get Wi-Fi and they couldn't recharge their phones or whatever the case may be. So there are some where it's definitely easier, and there are some where you have to be more creative, and there's some that we just sometimes say, no, we really don't think we can make that work effectively. Do you want to talk a little bit about timing?
Yeah, so I think I think a year is a good starting point, if you will.
For the length of the program.
Yeah, for the length of the program, because you do want people to see the content over and over again. You don't want it to just be a one-off and then you do it, another program another year, because then, that's not really, they're not seeing it, as much as they could if you were doing multiple programs for one initiative or a similar initiative. So I think a year is a good amount. Longer than that could work too. As long as, again, it's not, say July 2017 and then July 2018. That's not really, I don't think that would work very well.
Yeah, and we recommend at least 6 months. If you're not sure it's the right strategy, you should do a couple more one-off programs,
right,
and keep track of the influencers that are working really well for you. So with that, we are going to wrap it up. I really want to thank you all for taking the time. Hope you enjoyed it. We will send you a copy of this if you'd like to share it with anyone else on your team. In the meantime, keep an eye out for your email. We will continue to do webinars on this, and we'll reach out and let you know when they're coming. So with that, thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll talk more soon.